The sleet came down sideways that night, turning the streets of Talus VI into rivers of freezing mud. Robert pulled his coat tighter and kept walking. His boots splashed through puddles that reflected the dim streetlights above. The industrial district was quiet at this hour. Most people had enough sense to stay inside when the weather turned this nasty. His shift at the warehouse had run late again. 12 hours of loading cargo containers onto freight haulers bound for the outer colonies. His back ached and his hands were sore, but the pay was decent enough to keep a roof over his head. That was more than some folks on this planet could say. Robert passed an alley where 3 Keldon were huddled under torn plastic sheeting. Their amphibious skin looked dry and cracked in the cold. He dropped a few coins near their makeshift shelter without stopping. They croaked their thanks. 2 blocks later, he saw an elderly Vorthian trying to get her door unstuck. He stopped and helped her wrestle it open, then continued on his way. This planet was supposed to be an opportunity. 5 years ago, the recruitment posters made it sound like paradise. New world, fresh start, plenty of work for everyone. What they didn't mention was that Talus VI was barely habitable. The weather was terrible, the soil was poor, and the colony struggled just to feed itself. But Robert had stayed. He didn't really have anywhere else to go. Something brushed against his leg. Robert stopped walking, probably just garbage blown by the wind. He took another step and felt it again. This time it wasn't a brush. Something small and cold pressed against his ankle, then his calf climbing up inside his pant leg. His first thought was rats. The industrial district had plenty of them. He reached down to swat it away and felt scales. Smooth, cold scales. Then another weight hit his other leg, climbing fast. 2 somethings were crawling up his body, desperate and frantic. They reached his waist and burrowed under his coat, pressing themselves against his sides. Robert froze. These weren't rats. They were too big, too purposeful. He carefully opened his coat and looked down. 2 small creatures clung to his shirt, their claws digging into the fabric. They were the size of house cats, covered in dull bronze scales. Small wings were folded tight against their bodies. Their eyes were closed, and they were shaking so hard he could feel it through his clothes. Dragon hatchlings, Draxi juveniles. Robert had seen adult Draxi around the colony. They were impressive, powerful beings who commanded respect wherever they went. But these 2 were clearly not being cared for by anyone. Their scales were crusted with dirt. Their wings looked crumpled and weak. They were making tiny chirping sounds that reminded him of baby birds. They were dying. Robert stood in the freezing rain, feeling the 2 tiny bodies pressed against him, stealing what little warmth his own body could provide. He could shake them off, walk away. They weren't his problem. This planet was full of problems, and he couldn't fix them all. But their chirping was getting weaker. He made a decision. Robert wrapped his coat around the hatchlings, holding them against his chest. They felt like ice. He started walking faster toward his apartment building, 6 blocks away. The hatchlings pressed closer, their tiny claws pricking through his shirt. They were so cold they barely felt alive. The rain got worse. Robert kept his head down and moved as quickly as he could without jostling the creatures too much. Water ran down his neck. His pants were soaked through. But the hatchlings under his coat were at least getting warmer. He could feel them starting to relax slightly, their desperate clawing easing. His apartment building came into view. It was an ugly concrete block like all the others in this part of the colony. Cheap housing for warehouse workers and factory laborers. But it was warm and dry. Robert picked up his pace. He was 10 feet from the entrance when a large shape stepped out of the shadows and blocked his path. The Draxi was huge, easily 7 feet tall. His scales were a dark red, scarred and pitted with age. One of his eyes was gone, replaced by a mess of scar tissue. His wings were folded, but Robert could see they were torn in places. This was not a Draxi who had lived an easy life. "Those hatchlings," the Draxi said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. "They're street trash, abandoned. That makes them salvage under local law." Robert's grip tightened on his coat. The 2 small bodies underneath chirped softly, unaware of the danger. "Salvage belongs to whoever finds it first," the Draxi continued. He stepped closer. I'm Grask, and I found those hatchlings 3 days ago, been tracking them ever since. They're mine to claim. They came to me, Robert said. Quietly, they chose to ask me for help. Grask laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Help, I'll help them. There are fighting rings that pay good money for young Draxi. Toughen them up right and they'll earn their keep. Or maybe I'll sell them to one of the research labs. Either way, they're worth more than whatever sympathy you're feeling. The rain poured down between them. Robert didn't move. The hatchlings had stopped chirping entirely. He could feel their rapid heartbeats against his ribs. No, Robert said. Grask's remaining eye narrowed. No, you're human. You have no claim to Draxi Young. Hand them over or I'll take them. No, Robert repeated. The scarred Draxi took another step forward, his claws extended. For a moment, Robert was certain he was about to get torn apart on his own doorstep, but something stopped Grask. Maybe it was the way Robert stood his ground. Maybe it was something else. 3 days, Grask finally said. Prove you can care for them properly or they get taken by the authorities. That's the law. And when you fail, I'll be there to claim what's mine. He turned and disappeared back into the rain. Robert waited until he was sure Grask was gone, then hurried inside. Robert's apartment was small, but it was warm. 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that barely functioned. He'd never thought much about the space before. Now, looking at it with 2 dying hatchlings in his arms, it seemed impossibly inadequate. He set them carefully on his couch. In the light, he could see them properly for the first time. They were identical twins, their scales the same shade of bronze underneath the grime. Both had golden eyes that watched him with exhaustion and something that might have been fear. Their wings were so crumpled against their sides that Robert worried they might be damaged. One of them had a small notch in the frill along its left ear. The other had slightly darker scales around its eyes, like someone had drawn lines there. That was the only way to tell them apart. They were still shaking. Robert grabbed every blanket he owned and made a nest on the couch. He positioned his small space heater nearby and cranked it up as high as it would go. The hatchlings watched every move he made. When he reached toward them, they flinched but didn't run. Too weak to run, probably. It's okay, Robert said softly. He didn't know if they could understand him. You're safe now. He lifted them gently and placed them in the blanket nest. They immediately burrowed into the warmth, wrapping themselves in layers of fabric. Within seconds, only their eyes were visible, peeking out from the pile. Robert sat on the floor beside the couch. His clothes were soaked and he was starting to shiver himself, but he didn't want to leave them alone. Not yet. One small clawed hand emerged from the blankets and touched his finger. The scales were still cold but warming up. Robert smiled. We'll figure this out, he whispered. He had no idea how to care for dragon hatchlings. He didn't know what they ate or how often or what temperature they needed. He didn't know if they were sick or injured or just starving. But he'd promised to try, even if that promise had only been to himself. His handheld terminal chimed. Robert pulled it from his pocket. Unknown sender. He almost deleted it, then changed his mind and opened it. Heard about your new charges. You need help. Meet me at the Central Archive tomorrow. 800 hours. Come alone, don't bring the hatchlings, not safe yet. No signature, no explanation. Robert stared at the message for a long moment. It could be a trap. Grask might have sent it, planning to grab the hatchlings while Robert was gone, but the message didn't feel threatening. It felt like someone trying to help. He'd deal with it tomorrow. Right now, the hatchlings were finally sleeping. Their breathing had evened out and the shaking had stopped. Robert watched them for another few minutes, then forced himself to stand. He needed to change into dry clothes before he caught pneumonia. The night passed slowly. Robert dozed in his chair, waking every hour to check on the hatchlings. They slept through it all, occasionally making small sounds but never opening their eyes. By morning, their scales had brightened slightly. That had to be a good sign. At 7:30, Robert prepared to leave. He improved their blanket nest, making sure the heater was positioned safely. He left water in a shallow dish and some dried meat from his own supplies, though he had no idea if they could eat it. The hatchlings were still sleeping. The Central Archive was a large building near the colony's administrative center. Robert had never been inside before. He arrived exactly at 8 and found a human woman waiting near the entrance. She was older than him, maybe 50, with gray streaking through her. Dark hair, she wore practical clothes and carried a large bag. "You're Robert?" she asked. "Yes." "Diana Foster, xenobiologist. I've been on Talos VI for 15 years studying alien species development." She gestured toward a quiet corner. "We should talk." They sat at a table away from other people. Diana pulled out a datapad and called up several files. "Your neighbors talk," she said. Word spread fast about the human warehouse worker who stood up to Grask over 2 hatchlings. That took courage or stupidity. I'm not sure which. "They needed help," Robert said simply. Diana studied him for a moment, then nodded. "The hatchlings are about 3 months old, barely past hatching. They should never have been on the streets. Draxi take care of their young. Someone abandoned them deliberately." "Why?" "That's the question. Draxi twins are extraordinarily rare, maybe 1 in 10,000 births. These 2 surviving means they're either incredibly strong or someone intervened to keep them both alive. Either way, they're valuable, which makes their abandonment very suspicious." Diana pulled up more files. "Here's what you need to know. At their age, they need specific nutrition, raw protein, mineral supplements, and a special enzyme that helps them digest. Normally, adult Draxi provide that enzyme through pre-chewing food. Without it, they'll starve even if you feed them." Robert felt his stomach drop. "I don't have an adult Draxi helping me." "I know, but there are alternatives. Human saliva has different enzymes. It's not ideal, but there are documented cases of cross-species feeding working. I've prepared a mixture you can use. It might work." She pulled several containers from her bag. "Instructions are on the labels. Follow them exactly." "Why are you helping me?" Robert asked. Diana was quiet for a moment. "Because someone should, and because humans have a reputation in this galaxy. We care about things we have no logical reason to care about. Most species think we're foolish. I think it's our best quality." She handed him the containers. "You have 3 days to prove you can care for them." Grask filed a formal challenge. If the hatchlings aren't healthy and stable by then, authorities will remove them, and Grask will claim salvage rights. "What happens then?" "Nothing good, fighting rings, medical experiments. Grask doesn't care about their welfare, he cares about profit." Diana stood. "I'll check in with you tomorrow. If you need anything before then, contact me." She left Robert sitting there with containers of supplies and a head full of worry. He hurried back to his apartment. The hatchlings were awake, making frantic chirping sounds. When he entered, they rushed toward him on unsteady legs, climbing up his pants and shirt to reach his shoulders. Their tiny claws pricked his skin, but he didn't care. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry I left." They pressed against his neck, still chirping. They'd been afraid he wasn't coming back. Robert prepared the food mixture Diana had given him, following her instructions carefully. The hatchlings watched with huge golden eyes. He offered the bowl. They sniffed it suspiciously, looked at him, then began eating, slowly at first, then faster. Their scales brightened with each bite. When they finished, they climbed back into their nest and fell asleep immediately, their bellies round. Robert watched them sleep. 3 days to prove himself, 3 days to keep them safe. He could do this, he had to. 2 days passed in a blur of feeding schedules, temperature checks, and sleepless nights. Robert called in sick to work, something he'd never done before. His supervisor wasn't happy, but Robert didn't care. The hatchlings needed him more than the warehouse did. They were growing stronger. Their scales had gone from dull bronze to shining metal. They could walk without stumbling now, and they'd started making sounds that weren't just chirps, little trills and hums that seemed to mean different things. Robert was learning their language without really trying. He'd started calling them Leo and Iris. Leo had the darker scales around his eyes. Iris had the notched ear frill. They responded to the names, or at least they turned their heads when he said them. That was close enough. Diana visited each morning with new supplies and advice. She taught Robert how to check their wing joints for problems, how to monitor their temperature, what signs meant they were sick versus just tired. She never asked for payment. When Robert tried to offer what little money he had, she waved it away. "Consider it research," she said. "Nobody's documented cross-species raising of Draxi hatchlings in 50 years. You're giving me valuable data." But Robert could see it was more than research. Diana cared. She'd show up with new blankets that were softer than the ones Robert owned. She'd bring treats that the hatchlings loved. She'd stay for hours just watching them play with a soft expression on her face. On the evening of the second day, Leo managed to unfold his wings fully for the first time. They were small and delicate, like stained glass windows made of bronze. He flapped them experimentally and lifted off the ground for half a second before tumbling back down. Iris immediately tried to copy him with similar results. Robert laughed. It was the first time he'd laughed in days. The sound made both hatchlings stop and stare at him. Then Iris made a sound that was remarkably similar to a laugh. Leo copied her. Soon all three of them were making ridiculous noises at each other. That night, Robert fell asleep in his chair with Leo curled on his lap and Iris draped across his shoulders. He woke to someone knocking on his door. Hard, official knocking. He carefully moved the hatchlings to their nest and answered the door. A Draxi female stood in the hallway, flanked by 2 security officers. She was impressive, her scales a deep purple that probably cost a fortune to maintain. Her wings were folded with military precision. Everything about her screamed authority. "I am Magistrate Sela," she announced. "I'm here to inspect the welfare of the hatchlings and determine their placement. You have 10 minutes to convince me you're fit to be their guardian." Robert's mouth went dry. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. "Come in," he said. Sela entered like she owned the place. Her eyes swept over everything, cataloging and judging. She examined the blanket nest, the feeding bowls, the temperature controls. She picked up Diana's instruction sheets and read them carefully. The security officers stood by the door, silent and watchful. Leo and Iris had woken up. They peeked out from their nest, chirping nervously. "You are aware," Sela said, "that Draxi hatchlings require specific care protocols, that there are cultural practices you should be following." "I know I don't know everything," Robert admitted. "But I'm learning. Diana Foster has been helping me. The hatchlings are healthy. They're gaining weight. Their scales are bright and their wings are developing normally." "You're using human approximations of Draxi child-rearing. That's not the same as proper Draxi traditions." Sela turned to face him. "Without cultural validity, your guardianship can be challenged at any time." Robert felt something crack inside his chest. He'd tried so hard. He'd done everything he could think of, and it wasn't enough. Then Iris did something unexpected. She climbed out of the nest and walked directly to Sela. The magistrate went very still. Iris looked up at her and made a soft, complex sound. It wasn't a chirp or a trill. It was something deeper, more formal. Sela's eyes widened. Iris turned around and walked back to Robert. She climbed up his leg and into his arms. Leo joined her. Together they spread their small wings, creating a triangle around Robert's neck. It was an odd gesture, almost protective. "Do you know what they just did?" Sela asked quietly. Robert shook his head. "They acknowledged me as Elder Draxi, offering proper respect. Then they returned to you and displayed trust wings. That's not taught. It's instinctive. They've already bonded with you." Sela sat down on Robert's worn chair. "Tell me how you found them." Robert told her everything. The cold night, the alley, their desperate climb under his coat, Grask's threats, Diana's help, the last 2 days of learning and worry and hope. Sela listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "These hatchlings have genetic markers that indicate an ancient bloodline," she finally said. "They were stolen from a breeding facility 3 months ago. We thought they'd died. Their survival is remarkable. Legally, they should be returned to Draxi space for proper raising." Robert's arms tightened around Leo and Iris. He'd known this was possible. It didn't make it hurt less. "But," Sela continued, The facility wants them as property, not children. I oppose this. If you were to formally adopt them under human guardianship laws, and if they showed clear preference for staying with you, I could argue for an exception. What would that mean? Robert asked. It means you'd be responsible for them until they reach adulthood. About 50 years for Draxi. You'd need to ensure they learn Draxi language, culture, and traditions. It's been done before, but it's rare. The scrutiny would be intense. Robert looked down at Leo and Iris. They looked back at him with those golden eyes, completely trusting. He thought about the next 50 years, watching them grow, teaching them, protecting them. It was overwhelming. But he'd already made his choice in that alley. Yes, Robert said, I'll do it. Sela nodded slowly. Then I'll begin the paperwork. You'll receive official documentation within the week. I'll also arrange for a Draxi cultural teacher to work with you. She stood and moved toward the door. Most Draxi would never admit this publicly, but humans have something we've lost, the ability to love without calculation. These hatchlings are fortunate. She left, the security officers followed. Robert sat down with Leo and Iris still in his arms. 50 years. He was 28 years old. He'd be 78 when they reached adulthood, an entire lifetime. Iris chirped and nuzzled against his cheek. Leo did the same from the other side. Worth it, Robert thought. Absolutely worth it. 3 weeks of peace followed Sela's visit. Robert returned to work, but his supervisor agreed to let him work shorter shifts. The pay cut hurt, but Sela had arranged a modest stipend to help with the hatchling's care. It wasn't much, but combined with what he earned, it was enough. Leo and Iris thrived. They doubled in size, and their wings were strong enough for short gliding flights around the apartment. They'd started speaking in simple words, mixing human and Draxi languages without seeming to notice the difference. Robert taught them everything he could, and Diana visited regularly with more advanced lessons. The neighborhood had embraced them too. The elderly Vorthian who lived downstairs brought them treats made from insects she claimed were delicacies. The Keldon family across the hall taught them water games in the communal bathroom. Even Grask had disappeared, apparently giving up on his claim. Robert should have known it was too good to last. The message came on a Wednesday morning. His terminal chimed while he was feeding Leo and Iris their breakfast. The sender was listed as Legal Services, Draxi Breeding Consortium. Robert's stomach dropped before he even opened it. Legal claim filed against Robert Chen regarding guardianship of Draxi juveniles. Identification numbers pending. Hearing scheduled for Friday, 1400 hours, Colonial Administration Building. Attendance mandatory. Robert read it 3 times, his hands shaking. He called Diana immediately. She arrived within the hour, her face grim. The breeding facility found them. I was hoping we'd have more time. What do they want? The hatchlings back. They hold genetic patents on certain bloodlines, if Leo and Iris came from their facility, they'll argue ownership rights. Diana pulled up files on her datapad. They have lawyers, good ones. This isn't going to be easy. Friday arrived too quickly. Robert dressed in the best clothes he owned, which wasn't saying much. Leo and Iris sensed his nervousness and stuck close to him, making worried sounds. He carried them in a special carrier Diana had provided, speaking softly to them through the mesh. The hearing room was cold and official. Robert sat at a table with Diana beside him as his advisor. Across from them sat 3 representatives from the breeding facility. They wore expensive suits and had the confident air of people who always got what they wanted. Their lawyer was a Draxi male with impeccable scales and calculating eyes. Magistrate Sela sat at the head of the table, her expression carefully neutral. The facility's lead representative spoke first. His name was Gorin, and everything about him was smooth and professional. He presented their case with charts and documentation. The facility owned the genetic patents. They had records showing 2 twin eggs were stolen during a raid 3 months ago. Under galactic commerce law, the hatchlings were property to be returned. He showed images of the facility. Clean white rooms, temperature controlled with other juvenile Draxi in organized groups. He talked about proper nutrition, education programs, socialization with their own species. He made it sound reasonable, logical, correct. Then he showed projections, what Leo and Iris could become with proper training. Their bloodline produced exceptional fire breathers worth millions in military contracts. Robert felt sick. When Goran finished, Sela turned to Robert. Your response? Robert wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't good with words. He just told the truth. He described finding them in the alley, dying from cold, how they'd climbed under his coat, desperate for warmth, how he'd learned to care for them, sitting up through fevered dreams and fear. He showed video logs on his terminal, Leo's first successful glide, Iris's first complete sentence, their scales brightening day by day. They weren't property in that alley, Robert said quietly. They were children dying alone, and when they needed help, they came to me. Diana presented medical records, expert testimony proving the hatchlings had been hours from death when Robert found them. She raised questions about how facility property ended up starving on the streets if they were so well cared for. Goran dismissed it. Unfortunate but irrelevant. Property rights were clear. He implied Robert had staged the rescue to steal valuable assets. The accusations stung, but before Robert could respond, something happened. Iris stood up in the carrier. She was bigger now, able to balance on her hind legs. She spoke in clear Draxi, her voice small but firm. Not property, we are us. Leo stood beside her. Choose Robert, he is Clan Fire. The room went completely silent. Clan Fire. Robert had learned the term from the cultural materials Sela provided. It meant the heart of a family, the one who keeps everyone warm and safe. It was an ancient, deeply important concept in Draxi culture. Goran tried to recover. They're too young to understand. They've been influenced. They don't know their own interests. But Sela leaned forward. In Draxi culture, once a juvenile can speak and express preference, their voice carries weight. Are you suggesting we ignore that? They need proper Draxi raising, Goran insisted. This human can't teach them to fly properly, to breathe fire, to understand their heritage. He's doing his best, but it's not enough. Maybe we should ask them, Sela said. She looked at Leo and Iris. Do you want to stay with Robert or go with these people to their facility? Both hatchlings pressed against the carrier mesh, reaching toward Robert. Stay, Iris said firmly. Stay with Clan Fire. Goran changed tactics. He offered money. A lot of money. Enough to change Robert's life completely. We'll compensate you handsomely for your care. You've done well with limited resources. Now let professionals take over. Robert looked at the numbers on the screen. It was more money than he'd earn in 5 years. Maybe 10. He could leave Talus VI, go somewhere better, have a real future. Leo and Iris watched him with golden eyes. No, Robert said. They're not for sale because they were never mine to sell. They're people, and they chose to stay with me. I'm honoring that choice. Goran's professional mask cracked. He threatened legal appeals, making Robert's life difficult, exposing every mistake. But Robert had already faced down bigger fears. Sela raised her hand for silence. I've heard enough. Here is my ruling. Robert retains guardianship. However, the facility will provide resources for proper nutrition, medical care, and educational materials. Robert will accept regular inspections and work with a Draxi mentor. When Leo and Iris reach maturity, they may choose whether to explore their bloodline's legacy. All parties will respect that choice. Goran was furious but had no legal recourse. He left with cold promises that this wasn't over. Outside the building, Robert found a crowd waiting. His neighbors, people he'd helped over the years. The elderly Vorthian stepped forward. You protected them, now we protect you. That night, Robert's terminal chimed with a video message. Unknown sender. The image showed a Draxi female, older, her scales similar to Leo and Iris's bronze coloring. My name is Tara, she said, her voice shaking. I am the mother of those hatchlings. I was told they died. Please, I need to know if they're truly safe. Robert watched the message 4 times before he could process what he was seeing. Tara's face showed the same scale patterns as Leo and Iris. The The resemblance was undeniable. Her voice held pain and hope in equal measure. He called Diana immediately. She arrived with Sela, both looking serious. "It could be legitimate," Diana said, studying the message. "Or it could be the facility trying another approach. We need to be careful." Sela agreed. "If she is their birth mother, she has cultural rights, but we must verify her identity first." They arranged a meeting in the Central Archive's public gardens, neutral ground with plenty of witnesses. Robert brought Leo and Iris, though he kept them close. Diana and Sela came as observers. Security personnel waited nearby. Tyra arrived exactly on time. She was alone, her movements careful and non-threatening. She wore simple clothes, not the expensive outfits the facility representatives had worn. When she saw Leo and Iris, her scales literally changed color, rippling from bronze to pale gold and back. A physiological response to strong emotion that couldn't be faked. The hatchlings were curious. They'd never seen another Draxi show such obvious feeling toward them. They approached slowly, staying within reach of Robert. Tyra knelt, making herself smaller. She spoke in Draxi, her voice soft and breaking. Robert couldn't understand all the words, but he caught some. Mother, lost, searched, love. Leo and Iris listened, their heads tilted. Then they looked back at Robert, uncertain. He nodded gently, giving permission. They moved closer to Tyra. She extended her wings in a gesture Robert recognized from the cultural materials. A maternal greeting. Leo and Iris mimicked the movement instinctively, their small wings spreading. Tyra made a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. Sela stepped forward. "You claim to be their mother, prove it." Tyra pulled out documents, medical records from the breeding facility showing her egg harvesting, genetic profiles matching Leo and Iris, records of her formal complaints when she was told the eggs had died, evidence of months spent searching. "I was coerced into the breeding program," Tyra explained, her voice steadier now. "Debts I couldn't pay. They took my eggs, hatched them in machines. I never got to see them hatch. They told me both died after 3 days. I believed them for a month before I found someone who told me the truth. They were alive and stolen." She turned to Robert. "I don't want to take them from you. I can see they've bonded. You saved their lives, but please, I'm their mother. Let me know them." Robert studied her carefully. The pain in her eyes was real. So was the love. She'd spent months searching for children she thought were dead. That kind of devotion couldn't be faked. "What do you want?" he asked. "To be part of their lives, to teach them about being Draxi, about their heritage, to be their mother however they'll allow." Tyra's voice cracked. "I don't expect them to understand who I am, not yet, but I want the chance to show them." Sela and Diana exchanged glances. Sela nodded slightly. "We'll start slowly," Robert said. "Visits, supervised at first. If Leo and Iris are comfortable, we'll go from there." Tara's relief was visible. "Thank you, thank you." The first visits were awkward. Tara came to Robert's apartment twice a week. Leo and Iris were polite but distant. They didn't understand what a mother was. Robert was their family. This strange Draxi was just another visitor. But Tara was patient. She brought traditional Draxi foods, teaching them flavors they'd never experienced. She sang old songs in a language they were just learning. She showed them how to fold their wings properly during sleep, something Robert had tried to teach but never got quite right. Slowly, things changed. Leo started greeting Tara at the door. Iris would climb into her lap during visits. They began asking her questions about being Draxi, about flying about. Fire-breathing, questions Robert couldn't answer. One evening, Tara pre-chewed food for them the traditional way. The effect was immediate. Their scales brightened to a shade Robert had never seen before. The proper enzymes made a real difference. Diana confirmed it with tests. The hatchlings were absorbing nutrients better, growing faster. "You should do this regularly," Robert told Tara. "They need it." Tara's eyes glistened. "Are you sure?" "You're their mother. This is what mothers do." 6 weeks after that first meeting, Leo called Tara something new. "Wing mother," the Draxi term for the one who gave life and teaches flight. Iris copied him immediately. Tara cried, her scales shifting through a dozen colors. When she could speak again, she asked, "What do they call you?" "Clan Fire," Robert said. "Sometimes just Fire." "The one who keeps them warm and safe," Tara said softly. "It fits." They fell into a routine. Tara visited 4 times a week. She taught culture and language. Robert provided daily care and protection. Diana continued her research and medical oversight. Sela checked in monthly, her inspections becoming less formal and more like friendly visits. The neighborhood embraced Tara as they had Robert. The elderly Vorthian invited her to community meals. The Keldon children played with Leo and Iris under her supervision. She was becoming part of their strange, extended family. One afternoon, Diana asked Robert if he ever regretted his choice. The sleepless nights, the constant worry, the legal battles, the scrutiny. Robert watched Leo and Iris practicing gliding with Tara supervising. Iris completed a full loop and trilled with joy. Leo copied the move perfectly. Both looked to Robert and Tara for approval, needing both equally. "Never," Robert said, "not once." Diana smiled. "You've started something, you know. Other humans on Talos VI are taking in orphaned aliens, cross-species families. You've inspired them." Robert hadn't thought about it that way. He'd just been trying to help 2 dying children. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's all it took, one person choosing to care. That evening, the 4 of them sat in Robert's apartment. Leo was reading from a datapad about Earth, fascinated by the planet where his clan Fire came from. Iris was teaching Tara a human song Robert had taught her. "Will we see Earth someday?" Iris asked. Robert smiled. "Maybe when your wings are stronger." Leo looked up seriously. "We'll carry you. You gave us warmth when we were cold. We'll give you flight when you need it." Tara laughed, the sound like wind chimes. "They truly are your children, Robert. They have your heart." Robert looked at his strange family. A Draxi mother, 2 dragon hatchlings, and a human warehouse worker. It shouldn't work, but somehow it did. "They have both our hearts," he said. "That's what makes us family." 6 months after Robert found them in the alley, Leo and Iris had transformed completely. They were the size of large dogs now, their wings strong enough for sustained flight around the apartment building. Their scales gleamed like polished bronze in sunlight. They spoke fluently in both human and Draxi languages, often switching mid-sentence without noticing. They'd started going to school. Not a regular school, but a small community learning center where various species children studied together. Leo excelled at mathematics and history. Iris loved languages and art. Both were fascinated by everything, asking endless questions about the galaxy and how things worked. Robert had moved to a slightly bigger apartment, 2 bedrooms instead of 1. The hatchlings shared a room with a nest they'd built themselves under Tara's guidance. It was messier than anything Robert would have created, but they loved it. Tara visited almost daily now. She'd found work as a translator in the colony's administrative offices. She lived 3 blocks away. Some evenings she'd stay for dinner. Other times, she'd take Leo and Iris flying in the open spaces outside the colony, teaching them techniques Robert could never manage. The extended family had grown. Diana was officially their pediatric specialist. Sela had become something like a grandmother figure, stern but caring. The neighborhood watched over them all. Even some local Draxi had started visiting, curious about the unusual family and gradually accepting them. One evening, Robert came home from work to find Leo and Iris unusually quiet. They were sitting in their nest, not playing or studying or exploring, just sitting. "What's wrong?" Robert asked. Iris looked up. "We heard kids at school talking. They said we're not really Draxi, that we're half human because you raised us, that we don't belong anywhere." Robert's heart clenched. He'd known this day would come eventually. He sat down near their nest. "What do you think?" he asked. Leo spoke quietly. "We don't feel half anything. We feel whole, but we're different from other Draxi and different from humans. We don't fit in the normal boxes." "Good," Robert said firmly. Both hatchlings looked at him in surprise. You don't need to fit in boxes. You're Leo and Iris. You're Draxi with a human clan fire and a Draxi wing mother. You're fluent in 3 languages. You understand multiple cultures. You're not less than others. You're more. But we don't have a proper clan, Iris said. Not by Draxi rules. Then we'll make our own rules. Robert moved closer. Family isn't about following rules. It's about choosing to care for each other. I chose you in that alley. You chose me when you climbed under my coat. Tara chose to find you and love you. Diana chose to help. Sela chose to protect us. We're a clan because we say we are. Tara arrived then, letting herself in as she usually did. She immediately sensed the mood and joined them. When Leo and Iris explained what had happened, her scales darkened with anger. Listen to me, she said firmly. Being Draxi isn't about who raises you. It's about who you are. Your scales, your wings, your fire that will come when you're older. Your blood is ancient and pure. Anyone who says otherwise is a fool. But we love Robert, Leo said. We call him Clan Fire. Some Draxi say that's wrong. Tara looked at Robert, then back at the hatchlings. Love is never wrong. Your Clan Fire saved your lives and gave you a home. I gave you life and teach you to fly. You need both. Anyone who can't understand that doesn't deserve your attention. The conversation continued long into the night. Robert and Tara answering questions, offering reassurance, helping the hatchlings understand their unique place in the world. Later, after Leo and Iris had fallen asleep, Robert and Tara sat in the small kitchen drinking tea. They'll face this their whole lives, Tara said quietly. Being different, not quite fitting anywhere. I know, Robert said, but they'll face it together and they'll have us. Tara nodded. We make an unusual clan. The best kind, Robert replied. Over the following months, Leo and Iris grew more confident. They stopped trying to fit into expected categories and embraced being themselves. They made friends with other children who were also from mixed families or unusual situations. Taylor's VI with all its struggles was becoming a place where different kinds of families could exist. The breeding facility made one more attempt to claim the hatchlings, but Sela shut it down quickly. Leo and Iris were legally Robert's wards, culturally connected to Tara and old enough to express clear preferences. The case was closed permanently. 1 year after finding them, Robert stood in the community garden watching Leo and Iris fly. Really fly, not just glide. They soared overhead, their wings catching the wind, their scales flashing in sunlight. Tara stood beside him, her own wings spread slightly in unconscious mimicry. Other families were there too. A human couple with an adopted Vorthian child, a Keldon raising an orphaned human baby, a mixed species group who'd formed their own clan, all of them unusual, all of them thriving. You started this, Diana said, joining them. You chose to care when you didn't have to, now look. Robert watched the garden full of unlikely families. He thought about that cold night in the alley, feeling 2 tiny bodies crawl under his coat seeking warmth. The moment his life changed forever. I just helped 2 kids who needed it, Robert said. That's exactly the point, Diana replied. You saw suffering and refused to walk away. That's what humans do best. We care irrationally, impossibly about things that aren't our responsibility. Most species think we're foolish, but moments like this prove we're exactly what the galaxy needs. Leo and Iris landed beside them, breathless and excited. Did you see? Leo asked. Did you see how high we went? We saw, Robert said, smiling. You were amazing. Iris hugged him, her scales warm from flying. Leo did the same. Then they went to Tara, who wrapped her wings around them both. They needed both parents, both types of love, both worlds. As sunset colored the sky, the garden slowly emptied. Families heading home, children tired from playing, parents ready for evening routines. Robert walked with Leo and Iris on either side, Tara just ahead. Diana and Sela had joined them, arguing cheerfully about some obscure point of Draxi development. They passed through the neighborhood where people greeted them by name. The elderly Vorthian called down from her window. The Keldon children waved. Even Grask, spotted across the street, gave a grudging nod of respect. Robert's apartment was small and crowded when everyone was there. but it was full of laughter and life, full of questions and stories, full of the comfortable chaos that came from mixing languages and cultures and species. That night, after everyone else had left and Leo and Iris were asleep in their nest, Robert sat by the window looking at the stars. Somewhere out there were other children who needed help, other beings who were lost or alone or cold. He couldn't save them all, but he'd saved two. And those two had saved him right back. He heard movement and turned. Iris stood in the doorway, sleep-rumpled and holding her favorite blanket. "Can't sleep?" Robert asked. She climbed into his lap, something she'd been doing since she was small enough to fit under his coat. She was bigger now, but she still fit. "I was thinking," she said, "about the night you found us. Do you ever wonder why we came to you? Out of everyone on that street, why you?" Robert had wondered that same thing many times. Maybe you knew I needed you as much as you needed me. Did you need us? More than I realized at the time. Iris was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad we found you. I'm glad we chose right." "Me too," Robert said, holding her close. "Me too." They sat together watching the stars until Iris fell asleep. Robert carried her back to her nest where Leo was already curled up tight. He tucked the blanket around them both, marveling at how much they'd grown, how far they'd come from those dying, desperate creatures in the alley. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more questions to answer, more cultures to navigate, more people who didn't understand. But they'd face it together. A human, two dragons, and a Draxi mother who'd found her way home. A clan built on choice and love, rather than blood and tradition. The best kind of family,